Good afternoon, folks. Got a cider review for you here today. I'm looking at the Old Mout hard cider from the Mouterie Valley. A little bit confusing as to what hard cider actually seems to mean. I gather that in some countries hard cider is used to differentiate cider as in the alcoholic drink from cider just being crushed apple juice. But in England, hard cider seems to have another meaning. In New Zealand, there doesn't seem to be any particularly clear meaning. Here, as far as I can tell, they tend to, I guess they mean that it's a slightly more traditional cider, slightly less sugar, perhaps slightly more fruit in it, as opposed to one of the very clear and perhaps light ciders that seem to be quite prevalent now. This one's available in a 12 pack, 12 of these 330ml bottles for about $22 from most supermarkets and bottle stores. You might pay a little bit more, you might pay a little bit less on special. A little bit about Old Mout. Old Mout's part of the DB group, which in turn is owned by Heineken. And as well as Old Mout, that group also makes Monteiths, and they make cider. They have Orchard Thieves, which is also cider, which is a fruit flavoured cider, and they make the Rekorderlig range from Sweden. So 4 different ranges of cider, fairly confusing. The Old Mout, all of the Old Mout is sold in 1.25 litre PET bottles, except for this one. And this one's only available in these 330 ml bottles. It's also available on tap somewhere, but as far as from a bottle store or a supermarket goes, that's the only way you can get it. It's even more confusing because their PET range has cider at around 4 or 5%, and then a scrumpy range which is 8%. The labels look very similar, and they look even more similar to the rival Redwood sellers' Harvest cider, which also makes a scrumpy. So if you do happen to be looking for it at the supermarket, you can get, or the liquor store, you can get quite confused. And if you're after one or the other, you do just have to make sure that you actually carefully read the label to know what the heck it is that you're buying. This hard cider is 5%, so it's slightly more than their standard range. Had a look at the website. There is an Old Mout website. Confusingly, there's also a DB website, and the Old Mout site is honestly a bit of a mess. The only mention of this cider as of July 2018, which is now, was on the DB site under products, and it essentially says nothing apart from giving you a breakdown of the sugar and the carbohydrates on it. There's nothing at all on the Old Mout site. Their site seems to have been neglected for years. It's the trophy room. They've got trophies from 2011 odd through 2010 or 11 through to 2014. Nothing since then. They have won some trophies and awards, but they just seem to have given up on it. And it's really a bit disappointing. I mean, this is a multi-million-dollar corporation, and their websites they honestly don't look as good as the ones our son produces for his school projects. So what is actually in this hard cider? Pretty much what you'd expect. They say that it's mostly Braeburn apples, around 65%, mostly from the Nelson area, so I guess they're trying to use apples that are local to the cidery, because they do say that it's fresh crushed. There's some sulfites in it to keep it fresh, and they do provide a breakdown on the sugars, which I do always appreciate. This one's 3.9 grams per 100 millilitres, which, strangely enough, for something that's supposed to be a dry style cider, is actually exactly the same as their Old Mout classic cider. So there you go. What do they say it's like? They say it's a dry style cider, a traditional drop, not too sweet, and a golden colour, and something about it being designed to destroy the thirst of the men whose hands tirelessly work to make it. Which sounds like a bit of advertising jingle. But let's pop the top and get it into a glass and see what it looks like on the YouTube. So if you've seen any of my other cider reviews, you'll instantly notice that it doesn't look like your clear filtered apple juice. This looks much more like a slightly dark lager. They're not ridiculously fizzy, reasonable carbonation, and so true to name, it is a cider with, I suspect, just maybe a bit more body. It's certainly got a bit more colour. Very strong apple aroma on the nose. I wouldn't be able to pick it as Braeburn in particular, but it's definitely got a more appley aroma than some of your standard supermarket and liquor store ciders, which, to be fair, are about the same price as this. So this is, although it's marketed as a sort of slightly premium cider, it's not actually any more expensive. And from the first swig, there's two things. It does taste as if there's a bit more body in there. I'm honestly not sure whether that's the type of apple, or perhaps they've left a little bit more of the apple solids in. It's just got a slight haze to it. It's definitely not completely clear, but there's not much to it. In fact, I suspect that actually is just the condensation on the glass. But it's definitely a deeper golder colour, and it's definitely drier. The only downside to the dryness, which I've noticed with some of the really dry ciders that are fermented almost completely out, is that it can make them taste a little bit thin. But this is probably pretty well judged. At that 3.9%, your record ligs are often up around the 10 or 11, similar sort of sweetness to Coke. And one of the things that's nice about Coke is that you do get that real thick, syrupy flavour. You won't get that with this. This is much more, the consistency is much more like a beer, not that slight thick creaminess of a stout, but it's nice and refreshing. You definitely get the impression that you could drink this for quite a bit of an evening without it overwhelming you with vastly too much sugar. It's very crisp. There's not a lot of complexity to the flavour. It's honestly a pretty simple fermented apple juice, but it does have slightly more body to it than your standard New Zealand clear cider, and that lack of sugar is really appreciated. I certainly appreciate it, and if you normally drink beer, then I think you'd appreciate it too. So yeah, job well done. Nothing too scintillating, but a good effort. Won a silver medal at the 2017 New World Beer and Cider Awards, and I'd probably concur with that. And I'd give it around a 16 out of 20. Good solid cider, worth investigating if that sounds like what you're after. Hope you're enjoying what you're drinking today, and I'll catch you in the next video. Thanks for watching. Cheers.